Maya Chen stood at the entrance of Dragon's Den Martial Arts Academy, her small hands trembling slightly as she gripped the enrollment form. At 19, she was older than most beginners, but her petite frame and nervous demeanor made her appear even younger. The sounds of punching bags and shouted commands echoed from within the building, causing her stomach to flutter with anxiety. The receptionist, a muscular woman with calloused knuckles, barely glanced up as Maya approached the desk. "First time?" she asked, her tone suggesting she had seen countless hopeful students come and go. Maya nodded, sliding the completed form across the counter. Her handwriting was neat but shaky, revealing her nervousness. The receptionist's eyes quickly scanned the information before pausing at Maya's reason for joining. "Self-defense and confidence building." "You sure about this, honey?" the receptionist asked, finally looking up at Maya's slight figure. "This isn't one of those fancy fitness kickboxing classes. We do real martial arts here. Real fighting." Before Maya could respond, the main training door burst open and Instructor Rodriguez emerged, wiping sweat from his forehead with a towel. He was an imposing figure, standing over 6 feet tall with arms that looked like they could bend steel. His black belt was worn and frayed, a testament to years of serious training. "New student?" Rodriguez asked, his eyes immediately assessing Maya from head to toe. His expression shifted to barely concealed skepticism as he took in her appearance. She wore an oversized hoodie that seemed to swallow her frame, and her sneakers looked like they had never seen the inside of a gym. "Maya Chen," she introduced herself quietly, extending her hand for a handshake. Rodriguez took her hand, and Maya felt his massive fingers completely engulf hers. But what happened next surprised everyone in the room. As Rodriguez began to squeeze, testing her grip as he did with all new students, Maya's face remained completely calm. She didn't wince, didn't pull away, and didn't show any sign of discomfort despite the instructor's obvious attempt to intimidate her. However, Rodriguez felt something entirely different. Maya's grip was surprisingly weak, almost limp in his powerful grasp. He had expected some resistance, some indication that she had at least basic physical strength, but her handshake felt like holding a child's hand. Rodriguez muttered, releasing her hand with a slight shake of his head. He exchanged a knowing look with the receptionist, who smirked in response. "Well, Maya, we'll see what we can do with you. But I have to warn you, this isn't going to be easy. Physical strength is fundamental in martial arts, and frankly, you're starting from pretty far behind." Maya simply nodded, seemingly unfazed by his blunt assessment. "I understand, sir. I'm willing to work hard." "Work hard," Rodriguez repeated with a slight chuckle. "Listen, kid. Working hard is one thing, but you're going to need to build some actual muscle before you can even think about real techniques. Maybe you should consider starting with some basic fitness classes first." The suggestion hung in the air like a challenge, and Maya felt the familiar sting of being underestimated. It was the same feeling she had experienced throughout her childhood, being passed over for sports teams, being chosen last for group activities, being told she was too small or too weak for various opportunities. "I appreciate the advice," Maya replied, her voice steady, despite the embarrassment burning in her cheeks. "But I'd like to start with the regular classes, if that's okay." Rodriguez shrugged, clearly thinking this would be a short-lived endeavor. "Your money, your choice. We start beginners on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 p.m. Wear comfortable clothes you can move in, and don't forget water. You're going to need it." As Maya left the academy that day, she could hear whispered conversations behind her. The words "waste of time" and "won't last a week" floated through the air, but she kept walking, her chin held high. She had heard similar predictions before, and they only fueled her determination. That evening, Maya sat in her small apartment, looking at herself in the bathroom mirror. Her reflection showed exactly what everyone else saw: a small, seemingly fragile young woman with thin arms and a delicate build. But Maya knew something about herself that others didn't, something she had kept hidden for years. Growing up, Maya had been raised by her grandmother, a traditional Chinese woman who believed in old-world disciplines and philosophies. While other children played video games or watched television, Maya had spent countless hours learning about focus, breathing techniques, and mental discipline. Her grandmother had taught her that true strength didn't always come from visible muscles or imposing size. "Small stream can carve through mountain," her grandmother used to say in broken English, "if it never stops flowing." Maya had taken those words to heart, Though she had never had the opportunity to test their validity in a real physical confrontation, she had always been the quiet observer, the one who avoided conflict and tried to make herself invisible. But recent events in her life had made her realize that being invisible wasn't always an option. 3 months earlier, Maya had been walking home from her job at the local library when a man had approached her in a parking lot. He hadn't hurt her, hadn't even touched her, but the way he had looked at her, the things he had said and the fear she had felt in that moment had changed something fundamental inside her. She realized that her small size and quiet nature made her a target, and she was tired of feeling helpless. That night, as she prepared for her first martial arts class, Maya made a promise to herself. She wouldn't let anyone's preconceptions about her size or strength determine what she was capable of achieving. She had spent too many years allowing others to define her limitations. The next Monday couldn't come fast enough. Maya arrived at the academy 30 minutes early, dressed in simple black leggings and a fitted t-shirt that revealed just how thin her arms really were. As she waited outside the training room, she watched other students arrive. They were mostly men, all significantly larger and more muscular than her. A few women joined the group, but even they appeared more athletic and confident than Maya felt. When the training room doors opened, Maya took a deep breath and stepped inside, ready to begin a journey that would surprise everyone, including herself. The training room smelled of sweat and determination, its walls lined with mirrors that reflected the intimidating presence of 20 students warming up. Maya found a spot in the back corner, hoping to blend in while observing the others. Most of them moved with practiced ease, throwing punches and kicks that cut through the air with audible whooshes. Instructor Rodriguez entered with another teacher, a woman named Sarah Kim, who carried herself with the fluid grace of someone who had spent decades perfecting her craft. Sarah was compact and muscular with short-cropped hair and eyes that seemed to evaluate every student simultaneously. "All right, everyone, line up," Rodriguez called out. "We've got some new faces tonight, so we're going to start with basics. Remember, in martial arts, technique beats strength every time, but you need both to be truly effective." Maya noticed how Sarah's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer than the others, but the instructor's expression remained neutral. The students arranged themselves in neat rows, with Maya naturally gravitating toward the back, where she felt less conspicuous. "We'll begin with basic strikes," Rodriguez announced. "Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. Focus on form over power for now. Sarah and I will come around to make corrections." As the class began throwing punches in unison, Maya tried to mimic their movements. Her punches felt awkward and weak compared to the sharp, decisive strikes of her classmates. The sound her fists made when hitting the air was barely audible, while others created distinct whooshing sounds that spoke of speed and power. Rodriguez made his way through the students, adjusting stances and correcting hand positions. When he reached Maya, he paused, watching her throw several punches before shaking his head. "Stop, Maya," he said loudly enough for nearby students to hear. "Look at your wrist. It's completely collapsed. You throw a punch like that against anything solid, and you'll break your own hand before you hurt anyone else." Several students glanced over, some smirking at Maya's obvious inexperience. Rodriguez grabbed her wrist, positioning it properly, but even with the correction, her punches lacked any visible power. "And tighten up that core," he added, pressing his hand against her midsection. "You're throwing arm punches. Power comes from your whole body, not just your shoulder." Maya nodded, trying to implement his corrections, but the improvements were minimal. She could see the frustration building in Rodriguez's expression as he moved on to other students who required less fundamental instruction. Sarah Kim appeared beside Maya shortly after Rodriguez left. Unlike her colleague, Sarah's approach was quieter, more observational. She watched Maya throw several more punches without saying anything, her analytical gaze taking in details that others might miss. "You've never done this before," Sarah observed, her voice matter-of-fact rather than judgmental. "No, ma'am," Maya replied between punches, still trying to maintain the rhythm with the rest of the class. "But you're not afraid," Sarah continued, stepping closer. "Most beginners have tension in their shoulders, their neck, their jaw. You're relaxed, why?" The question caught Maya off guard. She hadn't realized her lack of visible anxiety was noticeable, let alone unusual. "I guess I figure being tense won't help me learn any faster." Sarah nodded slowly, as if this answer confirmed something she had been thinking. "Keep practicing. We'll work on power later. For now, focus on the movement patterns. The class moved through various basic techniques: kicks, blocks, and defensive stances. Maya struggled with most of them, her lack of flexibility and strength becoming more apparent with each new exercise. During partner drills, she was paired with Jason, a college student who looked like he spent more time in the gym than in class. "Don't worry about hurting me," Jason said with a condescending smile as they prepared to practice light contact drills. "Just try to make contact. We'll work on power once you get the basics down." Maya appreciated his attempt at encouragement, even though his tone suggested he was talking to a child. They began the drill, taking turns throwing controlled punches while the other practiced defensive blocks. Jason's strikes, even at reduced power, created small popping sounds when Maya blocked them. Her return strikes were so gentle that Jason barely needed to move to defend against them. "Come on, Maya," Jason encouraged. "Put some muscle behind it. I can barely feel those punches." Maya tried to increase her power, but the result was minimal. Other students began to notice the mismatch, and she could hear quiet conversations and suppressed laughter from nearby pairs. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she continued practicing, determined not to give up on her first day. Rodriguez wandered over during their drill and watched for several exchanges. "Jason, let Maya work on offense for a while. Maybe she'll find some power if she's not worried about defense." For the next 5 minutes, Maya threw punch after punch while Jason simply stood there, occasionally offering half-hearted blocks. It was clear that he wasn't taking her seriously as any kind of threat, and honestly, based on the evidence, he had good reason for his confidence. "Time," Rodriguez called out, ending the drill. "Let's circle up for cool down and discussion." As the students formed a circle on the mat, Rodriguez addressed the class about the importance of consistent training and gradual improvement. Maya found herself studying her classmates, noting how they carried themselves, how they moved, and how they interacted with each other and the instructors. "Before we finish," Rodriguez announced, "I want to remind everyone that martial arts is about more than just physical techniques. It's about discipline, respect, and understanding your own capabilities. Some of you are naturally athletic. Others will need to work harder to develop the same skills. The key is honest self-assessment and realistic goal setting." Maya felt certain this comment was directed at her, though Rodriguez avoided making direct eye contact. The message was clear: know your limitations. As class ended and students began filtering out, Sarah approached Maya again. "How do you feel after your first class?" "Tired," Maya admitted with a small smile, "Mum, but good. I know I have a lot to learn." "The question is," Sarah said, "are you willing to do the work even when progress feels slow? Because I'll be honest with you, Maya, you're starting from pretty much zero when it comes to physical conditioning." Maya nodded. "I understand. I'm not expecting miracles." "Good," Sarah replied, "because miracles don't exist in martial arts. Only training, dedication, and time. If you stick with it, you might surprise yourself with what you can achieve." As Maya gathered her things and prepared to leave, she overheard a conversation between Jason and another student near the door. "I felt bad for her," Jason was saying. "She's trying so hard, but she's just not built for this kind of thing. Rodriguez is being nice, letting her stay in the regular class instead of suggesting she try something else." "Give her 2 weeks," the other student replied. "She'll figure out this isn't for her and find something more suitable." Maya pretended not to hear as she walked past them, but their words stung more than she cared to admit. As she drove home, she found herself questioning whether they might be right. Maybe she was deluding herself about what she could accomplish. Maybe her grandmother's old sayings about inner strength were just comforting fiction. But as she pulled into her apartment complex, Maya made a decision. She would return for the next class and the one after that. She would prove to herself, if no one else, that determination could overcome natural disadvantages. She had no idea that within a few weeks she would shock everyone at the academy, including herself. 2 weeks into her training, Maya had settled into a routine that surprised even herself with its intensity. While her classmates went through their post-workout stretches and headed home, Maya remained in the academy's practice room, working on basic techniques until the janitor arrived to lock up. Her dedication was undeniable, but her progress remained virtually invisible to everyone around her. During her 3rd week, Maya arrived early to find Sarah Kim alone in the training room, moving through a complex series of movements that flowed like water yet struck like lightning. Maya watched from the doorway, mesmerized by the instructor's precision and control. Every technique was executed with perfect balance, timing, and power. "You can come in," Sarah said without turning around, somehow sensing Maya's presence. "I know you've been staying after class to practice. The night security guard mentioned seeing lights on in here." Maya entered hesitantly, not wanting to interrupt what appeared to be an advanced personal training session. "I'm sorry if I'm not supposed to use the room after hours. I can stop if it's against the rules." Sarah completed her sequence and turned to face Maya, her breathing steady despite the obvious intensity of her workout. "No rules against it as long as you're careful and don't break anything. But I'm curious about something. Most beginners get discouraged when they don't see quick results. What keeps you coming back?" The question was direct and deserved an honest answer. Maya sat down on a nearby bench, considering her words carefully. "I spent most of my life being told I was too small, too weak, too quiet to do the things I wanted to do. I got used to accepting those limitations and finding other ways to get by. But a few months ago, something happened that made me realize I was tired of being afraid." Sarah sat down across from her, clearly interested in hearing more. "What happened?" Maya told her about the incident in the parking lot, how helpless she had felt and how that feeling had haunted her ever since. "I know I'm not naturally strong or athletic," she concluded, "but I have to try. I have to know that I did everything I could to become someone who doesn't have to be afraid." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "Fear is a powerful motivator, but it's also a double-edged sword. It can drive you to improve, or it can make you tense and overthink every movement. Have you noticed which effect it's having on you?" Maya considered the question. "I think it's making me too focused on the wrong things. I watch the other students and try to copy their power instead of understanding their technique." "Exactly," Sarah agreed. "You're trying to be someone else instead of becoming the best version of yourself. Your body type, your size, your natural abilities are different from theirs. That doesn't mean inferior, just different." "But my punches barely register when we do partner work," Maya pointed out. "Jason told me yesterday that he can't even tell when I'm hitting him unless he watches my hands." Sarah smiled slightly. "Jason is a nice kid, but he's not the most perceptive student I've ever had. He's so focused on power that he misses subtlety entirely. Can I show you something?" Maya nodded eagerly. Sarah stood up and gestured for Maya to do the same. "I want you to throw your best punch at me," Sarah instructed. "Don't hold back, don't worry about hurting me. Just hit me as hard as you can." Maya hesitated. "Are you sure? I mean, I know it won't hurt you, but—" "Maya," Sarah interrupted gently. "Trust me and throw the punch." Maya took her fighting stance, drew back her right hand, and threw what she thought was her hardest punch toward Sarah's midsection. Sarah didn't block or dodge. She simply absorbed the impact with barely a shift in her posture. "Good," Sarah said. "Now I want you to try something different. Instead of trying to punch through me, I want you to punch to a specific spot. Imagine there's a button exactly 2 inches behind my solar plexus, and you need to press that button with the tip of your knuckles." Maya adjusted her stance and threw another punch, this time focusing not on power, but on precision. The punch felt different somehow, more focused and direct. "Better," Sarah observed. "Did you feel the difference?" "Yes, but I still didn't hit very hard." "Hard is relative," Sarah replied. "Let me ask you something. If you could hit someone with perfect timing at exactly the right spot with perfect technique, would you need to hit hard?" The question opened up a new way of thinking for Maya. She had been so focused on trying to match the raw power of her classmates that she hadn't considered other approaches to effectiveness. "My grandmother used to say that small stream can carve through mountain if it never stops flowing," Maya said slowly. "I always thought she was talking about persistence, but maybe she meant precision too." "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman," Sarah said. "What else did she teach you?" Maya thought back to her childhood, remembering lessons that had seemed irrelevant at the time. "She taught me breathing exercises, meditation, and something she called finding the quiet center. She said that when you can find stillness inside yourself, you can see things more clearly." Sarah's eyes lit up with interest. "Show me one of her breathing exercises." Maya demonstrated the technique her grandmother had taught her, slow, controlled breaths that seemed to calm her entire nervous system. As she breathed, she felt the familiar sense of inner quiet that her grandmother had helped her cultivate. "That's excellent foundation work," Sarah said when Maya finished. "Most of my advanced students can't achieve that level of centeredness. You've been learning martial arts principles your whole life. You just didn't know it. The revelation was startling. Maya had never connected her grandmother's teachings to physical combat, but she was beginning to see the connections. I want you to try something, Sarah continued. Tomorrow in class, instead of trying to hit harder, I want you to focus on hitting more precisely. Pick specific targets, breathe the way your grandmother taught you, and trust your instincts. Can you do that? Maya nodded, feeling more hopeful than she had since starting her training. I can try. Good. And Maya? Sarah added as they prepared to leave. Don't tell the other instructors about our conversation yet. Let them see the results first. The next evening, Maya entered class with a different mindset. Instead of watching her classmates' powerful strikes with envy, she observed their technique with analytical eyes. She noticed that many of them telegraphed their attacks, that their power came at the cost of speed and accuracy, and that they often left themselves open after throwing big punches. During partner drills, she found herself paired with Marcus, a stocky construction worker who was known for his devastating hooks. As they began their light contact exercise, Maya applied Sarah's advice. Instead of trying to match Marcus's power, she focused on precise placement and timing. Her first few strikes seemed as ineffective as always, but Maya noticed something different in Marcus's reactions. His blocks were more deliberate, his movement more cautious. After several exchanges, he paused the drill. Are you doing something different tonight? He asked, studying her with new attention. Just trying to focus on technique, Maya replied, not wanting to reveal too much. Well, whatever it is, keep it up. Your strikes are starting to feel more purposeful, I guess. Maya smiled to herself. It wasn't much, but it was the first time anyone had noticed improvement in her technique. As the class continued, she found herself moving with more confidence, breathing with more control, and striking with more intention. She still wasn't hitting hard by conventional standards, but something fundamental had shifted in her approach. She was no longer trying to be someone else. She was beginning to discover what she was naturally capable of becoming. 6 weeks into her training, Maya had become a different person, though the change was invisible to most observers. Her strikes still appeared soft, her movements still seemed tentative, and her small frame still drew skeptical looks from new students. But something fundamental had shifted in the way she approached every technique, every drill, and every challenge. Sarah had been secretly working with Maya during off hours, teaching her to harness the mental disciplines her grandmother had instilled years earlier. They practiced not just physical techniques, but timing, distance judgment, and what Sarah called reading the opponent's intentions. Maya discovered that her natural quietness, which had always seemed like a disadvantage, actually made her an exceptional observer of human behavior and movement patterns. You see things others miss, Sarah explained during one of their private sessions. Most students are so focused on what they're going to do next that they don't really watch what's happening right now. You've learned to be present in the moment. Maya was beginning to understand that martial arts was far more complex than she had initially realized. It wasn't just about strength or speed. It was about intelligence, timing, and psychological warfare. Every fighter had patterns, tells, and vulnerabilities. The key was learning to recognize and exploit them. One evening, Rodriguez announced that the class would be practicing a new drill, continuous light sparring with rotating partners. Each student would spend 2 minutes with a partner before switching to someone new. It was designed to help students adapt to different fighting styles and body types. Remember, this is light contact only, Rodriguez emphasized. We're working on technique and movement, not trying to knock each other out. Control your power and focus on clean technique. Maya felt her stomach tighten with anxiety. She had improved significantly in structured drills, but free-form sparring was completely new territory. She would be expected to react spontaneously, to create her own opportunities rather than following predetermined patterns. Her first partner was Jennifer, a tall athletic woman who worked as a physical therapist. Jennifer had good technique but tended to rely heavily on her reach advantage. As they touched gloves and began to spar, Maya immediately applied everything Sarah had taught her about observation and patience. Jennifer threw long, reaching jabs that Maya easily avoided by making small adjustments to her position. Instead of trying to match Jennifer's reach, Maya focused on timing and angles, slipping inside Jennifer's strikes to land light touches to the body before moving back to safety. Nice work, Maya, Jennifer said during a brief pause, you're moving really well tonight. Maya smiled, feeling more confident as they reset and continued. By the end of their 2 minutes, Maya had clearly held her own, using superior footwork and timing to compensate for her physical disadvantages. Her second partner was Trevor, a young man who fancied himself a future mixed martial arts competitor. Trevor was fast, aggressive, and had little patience for technical subtlety. He preferred overwhelming opponents with volume and intensity rather than precision. As they began sparring, Trevor immediately pressed forward with a flurry of punches and kicks. Maya found herself retreating, but not in panic. Instead, she moved with purpose, staying just outside his range while studying his patterns. Trevor telegraphed every technique with subtle shifts in weight and breathing that Maya had learned to recognize. After about 30 seconds of aggressive but ineffective attacks, Trevor began to slow down. His conditioning wasn't as good as his aggression suggested, and Maya had been making him work for every strike while expending minimal energy herself. Come on, Maya, Trevor taunted between heavy breaths. Stop running and fight. Maya didn't respond verbally, but she accepted the challenge in her own way. Instead of retreating from his next attack, she stepped forward and to the side, slipping his punch and landing a light but precisely placed strike to his ribs. The technique was perfectly timed and positioned, causing Trevor to stumble slightly and lose his balance. Whoa, Trevor said, looking surprised. Where did that come from? Maya simply reset her position and waited for him to continue. By the end of their round, Trevor was breathing heavily and looking frustrated, while Maya appeared completely composed. Rodriguez had been watching various matches throughout the room, but Maya noticed that his attention had begun focusing more on her exchanges. When the drill ended, he approached her directly. Maya, can I speak with you for a moment? She followed him to a quiet corner of the training room, wondering if she had done something wrong. Rodriguez studied her for several seconds before speaking. I have to admit, I didn't expect much when you first walked in here, he said bluntly. Your physical presence suggested you'd struggle with even basic conditioning. But I've been watching you tonight and I'm seeing something I wasn't expecting. Maya waited for him to continue, uncertain whether this was leading to praise or criticism. Your technique is still rough around the edges, Rodriguez continued, but your fight IQ is unusually high for someone with your limited experience. You're not trying to overpower people. You're trying to outsmart them. That's a much more sophisticated approach than most beginners attempt. Thank you, sir, Maya replied, not sure what else to say. Don't thank me yet, Rodriguez said with a slight smile. I want to test something. Tomorrow is our advanced class and I want you to attend as an observer. I think you need to see what real martial arts looks like when practiced by people who understand the mental game. Invitation surprised Maya. She had assumed the advanced classes were reserved for students who had demonstrated significant physical progress, not those who were still struggling with basic power generation. Are you sure? Maya asked. I don't want to be in the way or slow anyone down. You won't be participating initially, Rodriguez clarified. I just want you to watch and learn. I think you'll find it instructive. The next evening, Maya arrived early for the advanced class and took a seat on the bench along the wall. As the advanced students filtered in, she immediately noticed the difference in their presence and movement. These weren't just people who had learned techniques. They were people who embodied martial arts principles in their daily bearing. Sarah entered with the group, catching Maya's eye and offering a subtle nod of encouragement. The class began with warm-ups that looked more like combat choreography, every movement flowing smoothly into the next with practiced precision. What struck Maya most was how effortless their techniques appeared. There was no wasted motion, no excess tension, no indication of strain even during the most complex combinations. They moved like water, powerful but adaptable, always finding the path of least resistance to their objectives. During sparring portions of the class, Maya observed exchanges that looked more like conversations than fights. Each practitioner seemed to be asking questions with their techniques and receiving answers from their partners. It was a level of communication and understanding that transcended simple physical combat. As she watched, Maya began to understand what she was truly trying to learn. It wasn't about becoming physically stronger or faster. It was about becoming more intelligent, more perceptive, and more efficient in her approach to challenges. The advanced students weren't necessarily more athletic than her regular classmates. but they were vastly more sophisticated in their application of technique and strategy. By the end of the class, Maya felt like she had glimpsed a completely different dimension of martial arts. She was beginning to understand that her perceived weaknesses might actually be advantages if she could learn to leverage them properly. 8 weeks after her first class, Maya had developed a reputation that puzzled her classmates and instructors alike. She was still the smallest person in the academy, still appeared to have the weakest grip, and still threw punches that looked gentle compared to everyone else's. Yet somehow, she had become the most challenging sparring partner in the beginner and intermediate classes. Her success wasn't obvious or flashy. She didn't knock people down or overwhelm them with powerful combinations. Instead, she had an uncanny ability to make skilled fighters look awkward and uncertain. Partners who dominated other students found themselves missing techniques they had mastered months earlier, becoming frustrated with attacks that should have been successful, and feeling off balance in ways they couldn't explain. Marcus, the construction worker who had first noticed improvements in Maya's technique, summed up the general sentiment after a particularly puzzling sparring session. Fighting Maya is like trying to punch smoke. You think you know where she is, but when you commit to an attack, she's somewhere else entirely. What her classmates didn't realize was that Maya had been learning to exploit their psychological patterns as much as their physical ones. Through careful observation and Sarah's advanced instruction, she had identified the subtle tells that preceded most people's attacks. The slight widening of eyes before a jab, the shift in breathing before a kick, the micro-tension in shoulders before a hook. More importantly, Maya had learned to control her own tells. Her grandmother's meditation training had taught her to maintain internal stillness even during dynamic activity. While her opponent's intentions were often visible seconds before their techniques, Maya's own attacks came with virtually no warning. Rodriguez had been watching this development with growing fascination and decided it was time for a more serious test. After class one evening, he approached Maya with an unusual proposal. "Maya, I want you to participate in our monthly evaluation next week." Maya looked confused. "I thought evaluations were only for students who were ready to test for higher ranks. I'm still working on basic techniques." "Normally that would be true," Rodriguez admitted, "but your situation is anything but normal. I've been training martial artists for 15 years, and I've never seen anyone with your combination of physical limitations and tactical instincts. I want to see how you perform under real pressure. What exactly would I be expected to do?" Rodriguez explained that the monthly evaluation was designed to test students against both their peers and higher-ranked opponents. It included various sparring scenarios, technique demonstrations, and problem-solving exercises that revealed how well students could adapt their training to unexpected situations. "I won't lie to you," Rodriguez said. "Some of the people you'll face are significantly more experienced and physically capable than anyone you've sparred with so far. But I have a feeling you might surprise them and possibly yourself." Maya felt a mixture of excitement and terror at the prospect. She had grown confident in her abilities against familiar training partners, but facing unknown opponents with superior experience was an entirely different challenge. Sarah, who had been observing the conversation from across the room, joined them. "I think she's ready," she said simply. "Maya's learned things in 2 months that take most students a year to understand. Her approach is unconventional, but it's effective." Over the next week, Maya threw herself into preparation with even greater intensity. She arrived early for every class, stayed late to work on specific scenarios, and spent hours analyzing videos of advanced martial artists that Sarah had provided. She studied not just their techniques, but their decision-making processes, their timing, and their methods for handling different types of opponents. The night before the evaluation, Maya sat in her apartment reviewing everything she had learned. Her grandmother's picture sat on the nearby table, and Maya found herself having an imaginary conversation with the woman who had unknowingly prepared her for this journey years earlier. "You always told me that water defeats stone not through force, but through persistence and finding the right path," Maya whispered to the photograph. "I think I'm finally starting to understand what you meant." The evaluation day arrived with unseasonably cold weather that seemed to match Maya's nervous energy. She arrived at the academy to find it busier than usual, with advanced students and even some instructors from other schools present to observe or participate. Rodriguez gathered the evaluation participants in the main training room. Maya recognized most of the faces from various classes, But there were several people she had never seen before, including 2 black belts who looked like they could compete professionally. Today's evaluation will consist of 3 phases, Rodriguez announced. Technical demonstration, problem-solving scenarios, and free sparring. Each phase will test different aspects of your martial arts development. Remember, we're not looking for perfection. We're looking for evidence of understanding and practical application. The technical demonstration went smoothly for Maya. While her strikes still lacked visible power, her form had become nearly flawless. Each movement flowed naturally into the next, and her balance remained perfect throughout complex combinations. The evaluating instructors nodded approvingly, though she could see puzzlement in their expressions when they compared her apparent physical weakness to her technical precision. The problem-solving scenarios proved more challenging. Students were presented with various tactical situations and asked to demonstrate their solutions. Maya faced scenarios like defending against multiple attackers, escaping from grabs, and fighting in confined spaces. Her solutions were consistently creative and effective, relying on positioning, timing, and redirection rather than brute force. During one scenario, Maya was asked to demonstrate how she would handle a larger, stronger attacker who had grabbed her wrist. While other students showed powerful escape techniques that required significant strength, Maya's approach was entirely different. She seemed to flow around the attack like water, using subtle shifts in weight and position to make the grab ineffective, while simultaneously creating opportunities for counterattacks. "Interesting approach," commented Master Chen, a visiting instructor from another school. "Very economical use of energy and motion." But it was the free sparring phase that would truly test Maya's development. She would face 3 different opponents of increasing skill levels, with each match lasting 3 minutes. Her first opponent was David, an intermediate student known for his aggressive rushing attacks. As they touched gloves and began, David immediately charged forward with his signature combination of punches. Maya had sparred with him before and knew his patterns well. She sidestepped his initial rush, letting him expend energy while she stayed perfectly calm and centered. David's frustration became evident as his attacks consistently missed their mark. Maya wasn't just avoiding his strikes. She was making him look clumsy and predictable. Each time he committed to a powerful attack, she was already moving to a position that made his technique ineffective. Halfway through the match, Maya began her own offensive work. Her strikes were still light by conventional standards, but they were placed with surgical precision at moments when David was off balance or overextended. The cumulative effect was devastating to David's confidence and rhythm. By the end of 3 minutes, David was breathing heavily and looking completely bewildered, while Maya appeared as fresh as when the match had started. The observers around the mat were murmuring among themselves, clearly surprised by what they had witnessed. Maya's second opponent was Lisa, a brown belt with excellent technique and years of experience. Lisa was everything Maya wasn't: tall, powerful, and supremely confident in her abilities. As they prepared to spar, Lisa offered Maya a condescending smile. "Don't worry, honey," Lisa said loudly enough for others to hear. "I'll take it easy on you." Maya simply nodded politely and took her fighting stance. Sarah, watching from the sideline, smiled slightly at Lisa's assumption. When the match began, Lisa approached more cautiously than David had, clearly planning to use her superior reach and power to control the distance. She threw long, measuring jabs to keep Maya at bay while looking for opportunities to land more significant strikes. But Maya had been training specifically for this type of opponent. Instead of trying to close distance in straight lines, she moved in subtle arcs and spirals, gradually working her way into ranges where Lisa's reach advantage became meaningless. Her footwork was so smooth that Lisa found herself constantly adjusting her position without understanding why. 2 minutes into the match, Maya did something that shocked everyone watching. As Lisa threw one of her trademark straight punches, Maya didn't just avoid it. She seemed to guide it past her while simultaneously stepping forward and landing a light but perfectly placed strike to Lisa's solar plexus. The technique happened so quickly and smoothly that most observers missed the details, but the result was unmistakable. Lisa stumbled backward, her eyes wide with surprise, trying to process what had just happened. "Did you see that?" whispered one of the advanced students to another. She made Lisa's own punch work against her. For the remaining minute, Lisa fought with increasing desperation while Maya remained completely composed. By the match's end, it was clear to everyone watching that Maya had not just survived against a superior opponent, she had controlled the entire encounter. As Maya prepared for her final match, Rodriguez felt a mixture of excitement and concern. Her last opponent would be Jake Mitchell, one of the Academy's assistant instructors and a second-degree black belt. Jake was not just skilled, he was experienced in reading opponents and adapting his strategy mid-fight. "You sure about this?" Jake asked Rodriguez quietly. "I don't want to hurt the kid." Rodriguez glanced at Sarah, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod. "Just fight your normal fight, Jake. Trust me on this one." Jake Mitchell had been teaching martial arts for 8 years and had never been concerned about sparring with a beginner. At 6 feet tall and weighing nearly 200 pounds, he possessed the kind of technical skill that came from years of dedicated training combined with natural athletic ability. His black belt wasn't honorary. It represented genuine mastery of multiple fighting disciplines. As he stepped onto the mat to face Maya, Jake felt confident, but not arrogant. He had watched her previous matches and recognized that she possessed unusual tactical intelligence for someone with such limited experience. Still, there was a vast difference between handling intermediate students and facing a seasoned instructor who understood all the same principles she was learning to use. "Ready?" Jake asked, offering Maya a respectful bow. Maya returned the bow and took her fighting stance. For the first time all day, she felt truly nervous. Jake's presence was different from her previous opponents. He moved with the kind of controlled relaxation that only came from years of high-level training. There were no obvious tells in his posture, no apparent weaknesses in his positioning. When Rodriguez signaled the start of the match, Jake began circling Maya with patient, measured steps. Unlike her previous opponents, he showed no urgency to engage. He was studying her movement patterns, testing her reactions with subtle feints and position changes. Maya found herself in unfamiliar territory. Against less experienced fighters, she had been able to identify their patterns quickly and exploit their predictable responses. Jake, however, was actively concealing his intentions while simultaneously reading hers. 30 seconds into the match, Jake threw his first serious technique, a lightning-fast jab that barely missed Maya's face as she leaned away. The strike was perfectly controlled, designed to test her reflexes and timing rather than cause damage. Maya realized immediately that Jake was operating on a completely different level from anyone she had faced before. Instead of becoming discouraged, Maya felt something unexpected: excitement. For the first time in weeks, she was facing an opponent who truly challenged her developing skills. This was what real martial arts looked like when practiced by someone who had mastered both the physical and mental aspects of combat. Maya began moving differently, abandoning some of the patterns she had relied on against less skilled opponents. She couldn't predict Jake's movements the way she could with others, so she focused entirely on reacting to what was actually happening, rather than what she expected to happen. Jake noticed the change in her approach and found himself impressed despite his initial skepticism. Most beginners became predictable under pressure, reverting to their most basic techniques when challenged. Maya, however, was adapting in real time, showing a level of tactical flexibility that usually took years to develop. 1 minute into the match, Jake decided to test Maya's defensive capabilities more seriously. He launched a combination of punches and kicks that would have overwhelmed most intermediate students. Maya's response was remarkable. Instead of trying to block or counter each technique individually, she seemed to flow around the entire combination like water around stones. The observers around the mat had grown completely silent, recognizing that they were witnessing something unusual. Jake was clearly the superior fighter in terms of skill and experience, but Maya was making him work harder than anyone had expected. Halfway through the match, Jake attempted a technique that had never failed him against students. A deceptive low kick followed immediately by a high punch to catch opponents as they lowered their guard. The combination was perfectly executed, but somehow Maya avoided both strikes while managing to land a light touch to Jake's ribs as he recovered from the failed attack. Jake paused for a moment, staring at Maya with new respect. The touch to his ribs had been perfectly timed and placed, demonstrating that she hadn't just avoided his attack by accident. She had read his intentions and positioned herself to counter. "Not bad," Jake said with a genuine smile. "Let's see how you handle this." For the final 90 seconds of the match, Jake elevated his game to a level he rarely used against students. His techniques became faster, more complex, and more unpredictable. Maya found herself pushed to her absolute limits, forced to rely entirely on instinct and reaction. But something remarkable happened during those final moments. Instead of being overwhelmed by Jake's increased intensity, Maya seemed to find another level of performance within herself. Her movements became even more fluid, her timing even more precise. She wasn't matching Jake's power or speed, but she was matching his intelligence and adaptability. The match ended with both fighters standing and breathing hard, Jake from physical exertion, and Maya from the mental strain of operating at such an intense level. There was no clear winner in the traditional sense, but everyone watching understood that something significant had just occurred. Rodriguez called for a break while the evaluating instructors conferred privately. Maya sat on a bench still processing what had just happened. She had held her own against a black belt instructor, not through strength or traditional technique, but through pure tactical intelligence and adaptability. Sarah approached Maya during the break, carrying a bottle of water and wearing an expression of quiet pride.
How do you feel?
Like I just learned more about fighting in 10 minutes than I had in the previous 2 months, Maya replied honestly. Good answer, Sarah said. That's exactly what should happen when you face a truly skilled opponent. You discover capabilities you didn't know you had. Jake walked over to join their conversation, still looking somewhat bewildered by what had just transpired. Maya, I have to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. Have you trained anywhere else before coming here? Maya shook her head. No, sir. This is my first martial arts experience. Jake studied her face, looking for signs of deception, then slowly shook his head in amazement. That's incredible. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never seen anyone pick up tactical awareness so quickly. Your grandmother must have been an amazing teacher. The comment surprised Maya. She hadn't mentioned her grandmother to Jake, but somehow he had intuited that her unusual approach had deeper roots than just academy training. Rodriguez returned with the other evaluating instructors, their expressions serious but not unkind. Maya stood up, preparing to hear their assessment of her performance. Maya, Rodriguez began, we've seen a lot of interesting things today, but we need to discuss something with you. What you're doing isn't traditional martial arts as most people understand it. Your approach is so unconventional that we're not sure how to evaluate it using standard criteria. Maya felt her heart sink, wondering if this was leading to a polite dismissal from the academy. However, Rodriguez continued, what you're doing is undeniably effective. You've demonstrated capabilities that some of our advanced students don't possess, so we have a proposal for you. Maya waited, uncertain what to expect. We want you to start training with our advanced classes immediately, Rodriguez announced. Not because you've mastered the basic techniques, but because your tactical development has outpaced your technical training. We think you need to be challenged by people who can match your intelligence level. The announcement stunned Maya. In just 8 weeks, she had gone from being the weakest student in the academy to being invited into advanced training. More importantly, she had discovered that her perceived weaknesses were actually strengths when properly understood and applied. As she looked around at the faces of instructors and students who had initially dismissed her potential, Maya realized that her journey was just beginning. She had proven to herself and others that determination and intelligence could overcome natural physical limitations, but she sensed that her greatest challenges and discoveries still lay ahead. 3 months later, Maya stood in the same spot where she had first entered Dragon's Den Martial Arts Academy, but everything about her presence had transformed. She still possessed the same small frame and gentle appearance that had initially drawn skeptical looks, but there was something different in the way she carried herself, a quiet confidence that seemed to radiate from her core. The academy had become a second home to her, and she had developed relationships with students and instructors that went far beyond simple training partnerships. More importantly, Maya had discovered aspects of herself that she never knew existed. The scared, uncertain young woman who had walked through these doors had evolved into someone who understood her own capabilities and limitations with remarkable clarity. Word of Maya's unusual development had spread throughout the local martial arts community. Instructors from other schools had begun visiting Dragon's Den, curious to observe the student who was redefining conventional wisdom about physical requirements for martial arts excellence. Some came as skeptics, others as genuinely interested educators, but all left with a new understanding of what was possible when intelligence and determination replaced traditional reliance on strength and size. On this particular evening, Maya was preparing for what had become a weekly tradition, an open sparring session where students from various schools came together to test their skills against unfamiliar opponents. These sessions had initially intimidated Maya, but they had quickly become her favorite training opportunity. Fighting against unknown opponents with different styles and approaches forced her to rely entirely on real-time adaptation and problem-solving. Sarah approached Maya as she finished her warm-up routine. "There are some interesting visitors tonight," she said with a slight smile. "Two instructors from the Metropolitan Combat Academy have come specifically to spar with you." Maya felt a familiar flutter of nervous excitement. The Metropolitan Combat Academy was known for producing some of the most technically proficient fighters in the region. Their instructors were rumored to be exceptionally skilled and particularly proud of their traditional approach to martial arts development. "Did they say what they're hoping to learn?" Maya asked, adjusting her protective gear. "Actually," Sarah replied, "I think they're hoping to prove something rather than learn something. They've heard the stories about your unconventional success, and I suspect they're skeptical about whether your approach would work against real martial artists." Maya nodded, understanding the implication. She had faced similar skepticism from various quarters over the past few months. Many traditional martial artists struggled to accept that someone with her physical limitations could be genuinely effective against trained opponents. The first instructor from Metropolitan Academy was introduced as Master Thompson, a third-degree black belt with over 20 years of experience. He was a large, imposing man who moved with the kind of mechanical precision that came from countless hours of traditional drilling. His approach to Maya was polite but clearly condescending. "I've heard interesting things about your unique style," Thompson said as they prepared to spar. "I'm curious to see how it works against classical technique." Maya simply nodded and took her fighting stance. She had learned not to engage in verbal sparring before physical sparring. Her opponents usually revealed their mindsets and intentions through their words, giving her valuable insight into their psychological approaches. When the match began, Thompson immediately demonstrated why he had earned such a respected reputation. His techniques were textbook perfect, executed with power, speed, and precision that spoke of decades of dedicated training. But Maya had learned to see beyond the surface impressiveness of traditional martial arts. Thompson's perfection was also his weakness. Every technique followed classical patterns that Maya had studied extensively. His attacks, while powerful and precise, were predictable to someone who understood traditional martial arts theory, as well as practical application. Within the first minute, Maya had identified Thompson's preferred combinations, his timing patterns and his recovery habits. She began moving in ways that made his classical techniques ineffective, not by opposing them directly, but by ensuring she was never where his training had conditioned him to expect an opponent to be. Thompson's frustration became evident as his proven techniques repeatedly failed to find their mark. Maya wasn't just avoiding his attacks, she was making him look clumsy and outdated. Her counters, while still appearing gentle to observers, were perfectly timed and placed to disrupt his rhythm and confidence. Halfway through the match, Thompson attempted to overwhelm Maya with a complex combination that had never failed him in competition. Maya's response was to do something completely unexpected. She moved forward into his attack rather than away from it, slipping past his strikes and ending up in a position where none of his remaining techniques could reach her. The observers around the mat gasped as Maya landed a series of light but precisely placed strikes while Thompson was still trying to process her unconventional movement. When he finally reset his position, Maya was already back to her original distance, waiting calmly for his next attempt. By the end of the match, Thompson was breathing heavily and looking genuinely puzzled. He had thrown some of his best techniques at an opponent who appeared to have minimal physical advantages, yet somehow nothing had worked the way it should have. That was educational, Thompson admitted as they touched gloves to end the match. "I need to think about what just happened." Maya's second opponent was Master Rodriguez, not her instructor, but a different Rodriguez from Metropolitan Academy. This Rodriguez was younger, faster and more adaptable than Thompson. He had watched Maya's first match carefully and was already adjusting his strategy accordingly. "Interesting approach you have there," the second Rodriguez said as they prepared to spar. "Let's see how it works when your opponent doesn't cooperate with traditional patterns." This match proved to be Maya's most challenging since facing Jake months earlier. The second Rodriguez was consciously avoiding predictable patterns, mixing traditional techniques with improvised attacks, and constantly changing his rhythm and timing to prevent Maya from reading his intentions. For several minutes, the match remained remarkably even. Rodriguez's adaptability prevented Maya from gaining her usual psychological advantage, while her tactical intelligence kept her competitive despite his superior speed and power. The exchange resembled a chess match more than a typical sparring session, with each fighter constantly adapting to counter the other's strategies. But as the match progressed, Maya began to demonstrate something that surprised even herself. Instead of relying entirely on her ability to read and counter her opponent's patterns, she began creating her own unpredictable patterns. Her grandmother's teachings about finding stillness within motion had evolved into an ability to be completely present and responsive, creating techniques in real time rather than relying on predetermined responses. The turning point came when Rodriguez attempted a spinning kick that should have been too fast for Maya to counter. Instead of trying to avoid the technique or block it conventionally, Maya seemed to flow around it while simultaneously positioning herself to land a perfect strike just as Rodriguez completed his rotation and was momentarily off balance. Thus, his technique was so smooth and unexpected that Rodriguez actually stumbled, not from the impact of Maya's strike, but from the realization that she had turned his own attack into an opportunity for her counter. When he regained his balance and looked at Maya, there was genuine respect in his eyes. "Now that," he said with a wide grin, "was beautiful. I've never seen anyone do that before." As the evening's sparring sessions concluded, Maya found herself surrounded by instructors and students who wanted to understand what they had witnessed. The conversations were no longer about whether her approach was legitimate. They were about how she had developed such an unusual and effective fighting philosophy. Rodriguez, her original instructor, approached Maya as the crowd began to thin out. "Maya, I owe you an apology. When you first walked in here, I saw your physical limitations and assumed that would define what you could accomplish. I was completely wrong." "You weren't wrong about my limitations," Maya replied thoughtfully. "You just didn't realize that limitations can become advantages if you learn to work with them instead of against them." "Your grandmother would be proud," Sarah said, joining their conversation. Maya smiled, thinking about the elderly woman who had unknowingly prepared her for this journey years before she understood its purpose. "I think she always knew that strength comes in many different forms. She just trusted me to figure out which form was mine." As Maya gathered her gear and prepared to leave the academy that night, she reflected on how much her life had changed since that first nervous visit months earlier. She had entered as someone who felt powerless and afraid, seeking to become strong enough to protect herself. What she had discovered was something far more valuable. She had learned to understand and trust her own unique capabilities. The young woman who had once been embarrassed by her weak handshake now understood that true strength wasn't about having a crushing grip. It was about knowing exactly when, where, and how to apply whatever force you possessed. Maya had become living proof that intelligence, determination, and self-awareness could overcome almost any physical disadvantage. More importantly, she had learned that the greatest victories weren't about defeating others, but about discovering the best version of yourself. As she walked out into the evening air, Maya carried with her the quiet confidence of someone who had found her own path to strength, one that no one could take away because it came from within.